My question is, what is it about Chris Cornell that sets him aside from everyone else, and that particularly that you latched onto?
Well, I love talking about Chris Cornell. So you opened up a huge, huge landscape. I was initially attracted to Chris Cornell. It's kind of funny. I remember hearing Black Hole Sun on the radio, and thinking, oh yeah, that's cool song. And just, I really loved the odd time breakdown on the guitar solo, right? Like, da, 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 da. And how, the drums always had this sort of derivative fill at the end, and this mayhem guitar. And I thought, oh, this is cool. And it's really a departure from the rest of the song. And so I remember going over to a friend's house, and he had the full album. And he was, of course, the only song he played off of it was Black Hole Sun. And I thought, okay, well, neat. I was like, could I borrow this? So I borrowed the CD, and I made a cassette copy of it, and I gave it back. And I remember putting it on my boombox and listening to it all the way through for the first time. And of course, it's on cassette, not on CD, so I couldn't skip. Right? I just had to I hit play and then was just going. So I couldn't do what he was doing on the CD and just go to Black Hole Sun or go to the immediate radio play stuff. And I started, Let Me Drown, My Way, Fell on Black Days, Mailman, going from start to finish and going, oh, this is way different than I thought. And I didn't actually quite know what to think of it, because I was so taken off guard by the power and diversity of what I heard in Chris's voice. It just wasn't what Black Hole Sun was, that I was kind of, like this sort of fire hose moment where I was like, well, I don't really, So I kind of left it alone for maybe a few days and then came back to it. And then I just couldn't stop. I wore that tape out, wore it out. And then, of course, I had to go buy the CD. And I think that what started to attract me to his voice is that there was something that I always regularly felt in frustrations and in excitement and even in sleepiness and all sorts of different, that his voice was, it felt like an extension of how I feel. And I know a lot of people will say that about Chris Cornell's voice. I don't know that a lot of people have gone to the lengths to capture why, right? And part of me studying his voice so much is because there was this representation of, I felt that part of me existed in what he was singing in a way that's beyond other musicians that I really, really love. He's the only one I've ever felt like that about. And the more, and there was this period where, of course, when I was trying to sing and hone my own voice, I couldn't do what he was doing at all. And there was this kind of frustration and disconnect, which I eventually got over. But even before I started to try to sing and sing like him, there was this resonance. He expressed in a way, without even using specific words, that resonated with how I felt. I even, at when that came out, I was 13 years old, I think. And I had already struggled with depression. I've had relatives that have been in and out of, institutions and stuff like that for mental health. I had a distant relative that did kill himself, and so that's a predisposition, and not that I didn't latch on to that. I didn't really know that about Chris Cornell at the time, but the way he crowed and wailed and screamed, and then also whispered and crooned, there was, it mirrored something in me. And I couldn't explain it. I still can't fully explain it. But I know that when I sing with my own voice now, which is different than his, and I'm glad that it's different. When I sing with my own voice now, though, I release that energy that I couldn't explain. And that's thanks to my own vocal exploration journey. But I am able to release and express that energy of, frustration and discouragement and never measuring up and finally measuring up, but not really. And being so uncontrollably and not understanding my anxiety, yet being able to express it somehow with a scream that I couldn't possibly express with words.
Yeah, that's I kind of it's I can sort of I could really resonate with when you were saying about how you felt like the music of Soundgarden was expressing something that you felt, or Chris Cornell's voice in particular. Like, anyone who listens will know Alter Bridge are like my all-time favorite band, and I think for me, I've been able to, I think, recently put my finger on why I like it, and it's that there are these really dark moments and some quite somber and there's some like disgusting riffs that they're not happy by any means, and there's some quite somber moments, some quite sorrowful kind of guitar parts, and then you've got these massive uplifting choruses, and I think it's that whole sort of from the darkness you can have these amazing kind of, it's the contrast, it's the kind of light and shade that happens that I find is what I don't like. Music that I feel is just in the same place all the time, and I mean I do in the same way I like to go to McDonald's every now and again. I like certain changes to what I like, what is my favorite thing, but
sure.
To me, I feel so bad for any bands that I've just McDonald'sized or whatever, but you know what I mean? Like there are certain bands that to me, I enjoy it in the moment, but I don't really take anything from it. And I can resonate with that for, in that sense, because I feel like there is that unspoken, kind of thing. But I mean, it's getting quite somber, but what did you make of sort of Chris's passing, that kind of moment?
I remember I was sitting on the toilet and I got a notification from what was at that time my boss, who texted me an image of Chris Cornell and said, "Sorry for your loss." And I was like, "What? No." And I couldn't even, like this doesn't square, right? He's got young kids who are, his kids now are, or at the time were the age of my kids that are now. And, there was nothing, he was not in a place in life, at least that we saw. He had a loving wife and kids and was kind of doing whatever he wanted artistically and still vital as a songwriter, and his voice still sounded great and was sounding better every year, even though he's getting older. And man, I was not only surprised, like I broke down, and I was surprised myself that I broke down. I cried like a family member had died. And it's still a bit, it's silly because I never knew him. I never talked to him. I never, he didn't know, we had no real relationship. And, talking with other friends, I got so many texts too, about it from people that, they knew that I knew, but they were saying, "I'm sorry for your loss," just like my friend and boss was. Like they knew it meant a ton to me, and it meant a lot to me because of who he has been to me as a role model and artistic role model. But it hit me especially hard because, man, if he in his position is susceptible to that momentary lapse, and I really do believe, I agree with his wife that he was not in the right state of mind when he took his life, and I can say that I've obviously have not been that close and been in that space, but I have been in spaces where my mind is off from what it normally is, and things are way worse than they seem to be. And where's that line, right? Of where you lose enough common sense to forget about all the good things that are going on in your life and choose to end it. At that point, is it even really a choice? Because your brain is so off. You've set because you've taken something, or because you've gotten yourself in such a tailspin. That's not always just this light switch. Today I'm on. It's like the thought patterns and addictions that you foster can come back to bite you later. But yeah, it was a reality check for me. So many celebrities, so many rock musicians have their lives have ended prematurely, and I haven't lived a life like that, but I really relate to the struggles that a lot of them have expressed. A lot of the interviews of Chester Bennington, talking about how he really struggled with that, and you look at him and you go, but look what you have, look what you've done, look what you're a part of. How could you think that way? How could you feel that way? And realizing that it's not that they want to feel that way. It's that they don't want to feel that way, and that feeds into the problem, right? And so you turn that back on yourself, and I've turned that back on myself many times. Like when I start feeling extremely anxious, I struggle majorly with anxiety. When I start to feel really, really anxious, I ask myself that question that I asked Chester and Chris Cornell and say, look, look what you have. Look who loves you. Look who's around you. Look what you've done. Look what you're doing. Look who you're helping. And that does help me, but it doesn't get rid of the struggle. It doesn't. And I think that's why, Chester and Chris's death, both, they continue to, I probably think about it every day. Because as I go up and down, I guess you could say I'm still trying to learn from them. And in this case, it's like, you're never too with it to let your guard down if you struggle with depression and anxiety or substance addiction. You're never too, and hopefully you're never too down in the dumps and desperate to be able to do that check of like being thankful and taking stock in what you've been given and who loves you and who you love and what you're able to do. And, maybe, and I've certainly been at points too in my life where some of those questions are, it's hard to be thankful for where you're at, right? And so that feeds into those dark places even more. But there's always something. And it's interesting that you see these millionaires, having problems with depression and stuff like that. But you see people, you see kids that have nothing playing with a tin can in a muddy area, in an impoverished area of the world, being happy and clinging to life. So success, perceived success, money, obviously, people say this all the time, but it doesn't equate to happiness. It doesn't equate to contentment. And so you can't really say that, because I have all this stuff that I'm happy and I shouldn't be miserable. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm just saying that some things that tend to trigger anxiety and trigger this lack of self-worth can be demoted by focusing on what brings you joy, whatever it is.